The alien research vessel Celestia drifted silently through Earth's outer atmosphere, its cloaking systems active as it observed the blue planet below. Hannah adjusted the sensitivity on her scanners, her four-fingered hands moving with practiced precision across the control panel. As the ship's lead xenobiologist, she found Earth particularly fascinating, a world teeming with life forms that evolved in what her people would consider extreme heat. Recording atmospheric composition, Hannah noted in the ship's log. Her voice was melodic but formal, as was typical for Cerealians. Nitrogen-oxygen mix with trace gases, temperature readings consistent with previous scans, unsuitable for prolonged Cerealian exposure. The warning lights flashed suddenly, bathing the research deck in pulsing red. Gravitational disturbance detected, announced the ship system. Anomaly approaching at high velocity. Captain Minho rushed onto the deck. Status report. Before Hannah could respond, the Celestia lurched violently. The ship's hull groaned as unknown forces pulled it from its stable orbit. Hannah gripped her station as instruments sparked around her. Some kind of spatial rift, she shouted over the alarms. Our engines cannot compensate. Evacuation protocol initiated, Minho ordered. All personnel to escape pods immediately. Chaos erupted as the crew rushed to their designated evacuation points. Hannah grabbed her personal data unit and hurried toward the nearest escape pod. The ship shuddered again, throwing her against a wall. A section of ceiling collapsed, blocking her path forward. Hannah, divert to secondary evacuation point. Minho's voice crackled through her communicator. Pod Bay Forward is still accessible. She changed direction, racing through the trembling corridors. The ship was breaking apart around her. When she reached Pod Bay 4, only one escape pod remained. Hannah climbed inside and activated the launch sequence. The pod ejected from the failing research vessel, but instead of a controlled descent, it spun wildly, caught in Earth's gravitational pull. Emergency stabilizers failing. The pod's computer informed her. Preparing for crash protocol. Hannah secured herself in the crash webbing as the pod entered Earth's atmosphere. The heat shield glowed white-hot, and warning systems blared as the small craft plummeted toward the surface. Through the viewport, she saw forests and mountains rushing toward her. The impact knocked her unconscious. Hours later, Hannah awoke to unfamiliar sensations. Pain radiated through her body, a feeling Cerealians rarely experience given their controlled environment. Worse, her environmental suit was damaged, its temperature regulation systems offline. Earth's air had seeped in, and she felt a strange burning sensation spreading through her chest with each breath. Too hot, she gasped, trying to assess the damage. Her blue skin, normally pale and cool, felt flushed and warm. Cerealian biology was adapted to temperatures well below freezing. Earth's temperate climate was dangerously hot for her species. She tried to activate her emergency beacon, but found the communication system damaged beyond repair. The escape pod had broken open upon impact, leaving her exposed to the forest around her. Night was falling, bringing minimal relief from the heat. Hannah knew she needed to find shelter and repair her suit, or her body would soon begin to fail under these conditions. As she struggled to stand, a wave of dizziness overcame her. Her metabolism, evolved for efficiency in cold environments, was accelerating in response to Earth's oxygen-rich atmosphere. The sensation was overwhelming. Control, she reminded herself, using Cerealian meditation techniques to focus. Adapt. Survive. Hannah managed a few steps before collapsing again. Her vision blurred as her body fought against the alien environment. In the gathering darkness, she heard something approaching, heavy footsteps crushing fallen leaves. A human appeared before her, tall with dark hair and wide eyes that grew even wider at the sight of her. He carried some kind of pack and wore clothes suitable for hiking through the forest. The human male stopped, clearly shocked. He cautiously approached, keeping a safe distance. Are you real? Hannah could not understand his words, but recognized his caution. She raised a hand in what she hoped would appear as a non-threatening gesture. The movement sent pain shooting through her arm. "Help," she said in her own language, knowing he wouldn't understand but hoping her tone would convey her desperation. The sleek silver transport ship descended through Earth's atmosphere, its hull shimmering as it passed through wispy clouds. Inside, Dr. Lena Kang checked her breathing apparatus one final time. The delicate purple membranes along her neck fluttered with nervousness. After years of studying humans from afar, she would finally meet them face to face. "Landing sequence complete," announced the ship's computer. "Welcome to Earth Global Science Institute, Dr. Kang." Lena smoothed down her formal science uniform, a simple blue tunic that matched the color of her skin, and adjusted the filter mask that protected her from Earth's oxygen-rich atmosphere. Her species, the Illuvians, required less oxygen and more nitrogen than humans. Too much oxygen would make her dizzy at best, fatally intoxicated at worst. The ship's doors slid open. Bright sunlight streamed in, making Lena squint with her large, entirely black eyes. Earth was much brighter than her homeworld, where a distant red sun provided softer illumination. A small group of humans waited on the landing pad. Lena recognized the tall man standing at the front as Dr. Ta Kim from their video communications. He stepped forward as she descended the ramp. "Dr. Kang, welcome to Earth." He extended his hand, then quickly pulled it back. "I apologize. I forgot about the no-contact protocols." Lena appreciated his attempt to respect her customs. The Luvians exchanged complicated greeting patterns with their four-fingered hands rather than touching palms. "Thank you for remembering, Dr. Kim," she said, her translator converting her melodic language into crisp English. She performed a traditional Illuvian greeting gesture instead, her fingers moving in precise patterns. "I am honored to be the first Illuvian scientist to visit your planet." "The honor is ours," Dr. Kim replied. He was shorter than most Illuvians, but taller than the other humans present. His black hair was cut short, and he wore a simple white coat over casual clothes. "We've prepared a special laboratory space for our joint research. It has an adjusted atmospheric mixture for your comfort." The small group moved inside a gleaming white building. Lena noticed how the humans kept a respectful distance from her. Their research center's halls were wide and brightly lit, with large windows showing the green landscape outside. "Your planet has so much water," Lena observed, looking at a distant lake. "And so many plants." "Is your world very different?" asked a female human scientist walking beside them. "Yes, Illuvia has mostly desert regions with specialized vegetation. Our cities are built underground to escape the heat." They arrived at the laboratory, a spacious room filled with equipment both familiar and strange to Lena. One section was enclosed in clear walls with different air vents. "This is your workspace," Dr. Kim explained. "The atmosphere inside is adjusted to be more comfortable for you, with lower oxygen levels. The rest of us will wear supplemental oxygen when working directly with you." Lena stepped inside the enclosure and felt immediate relief as the air pressure and composition shifted to match her needs. She removed her breathing mask and took a deep, comfortable breath. "This is perfect," she said, feeling truly welcomed. "You've gone to great lengths for my comfort." "Science is universal," Dr. Kim said with a smile. "Comfort helps good research." Over the next few hours, Dr. Kim showed Lena their equipment and explained his research. He specialized in human pheromone studies, particularly compounds that could reduce anxiety and enhance social bonding. Humans release different chemicals when stressed versus relaxed, he explained, showing her molecular diagrams on a large screen. "My team has synthesized compounds that mimic our natural calming pheromones. They could help people with social anxiety or stress disorders." Lena found herself fascinated. "Illuvians have different chemical communication systems," she shared. "We use skin secretions for emotional signaling, but they work through different receptors than yours." As the day progressed, Lena grew more comfortable with Dr. Kim. Despite their biological differences, they shared a scientist's curiosity and methodical approach. "Would you like to see our current experiment?" Dr. Kim asked late in the afternoon. He led her to a sealed chamber containing small plants. These have been genetically modified to respond to human pheromone compounds. They can essentially feel human emotions through chemical detection. Lena watched in amazement as the plant's leaves shifted position when Dr. Kim released a test compound nearby. The plants detect the chemical and respond as if a stressed human were present, he explained. They're trying to release oxygen to help calm the perceived human. Plants that respond to emotions, Lena marveled. On Alluvia, we have something similar, but our plants respond to changes in light patterns. As evening approached, Lena noticed herself growing tired. Earth's slightly stronger gravity was taxing her muscles. We've prepared quarters for you with adjusted atmospheric conditions, Dr. Kim said, noticing her fatigue. Tomorrow we can begin our collaborative work. The residential quarters were simple but comfortable. Lena appreciated the small touches. The lighting was dimmer, more like Alluvia's red sun, and the bed was firmer, as Alluvians preferred. Alone in her room, Lena recorded her first day's observations in her personal log. Humans are both familiar and strange, she dictated. They show curiosity like Alluvians, but express emotions more openly through facial movements. Dr. Kim seems intelligent and respectful. His work on chemical communication pathways may complement my research on interspecies understanding. She paused, looking out her window at Earth's moon rising in the night sky. Tomorrow we begin our real work, she continued. Dr. Kim's pheromone compounds might be adaptable for Alluvian biology, creating the first chemical bridge between our species. If successful, we could revolutionize interspecies communication. Lena closed her log and prepared for sleep, unaware that her upcoming collaboration with Dr. Kim would lead to discoveries far more personal and profound than she ever imagined. The accidental exposure that awaited her would not only change her understanding of human biology, but would challenge everything she thought she knew about her own species' emotional capacity. 2 weeks passed quickly as Lena and Dr. Kim settled into a productive research routine. Their different approaches complemented each other well. Where Lena was methodical and cautious, Dr. Kim was innovative and quick to test new ideas. Together, they made more progress on the pheromone project than either could have alone. Today, the lab was busier than usual. Dr. Kim's team had achieved a significant breakthrough with their anxiety-reducing compound. They had successfully isolated a synthetic version that worked better than the natural human pheromone. The test results show a 40% increase in effectiveness, Dr. Kim explained as he showed Lena the data on his tablet. And no side effects in any of our human test subjects. Lena studied the molecular structure displayed on the screen. The binding sites are remarkably similar to certain Alluvian calming compounds, she observed, though ours work through skin absorption rather than inhalation. By late afternoon, a small celebration had begun in the lab. Someone brought in food and drinks, and the usual strict laboratory protocols relaxed slightly. Lena watched from her separate atmospheric chamber as the humans laughed and congratulated each other. Dr. Kim approached her enclosed workspace with 2 small cups. "Would you like to join our celebration?" he asked through the intercom. "This is purified water with just a trace amount of our new compound. We filtered out all Earth contaminants and adjusted the pH for your biology. Completely safe." Lena hesitated. She had never consumed anything prepared on Earth before. All her food and drink came from supplies shipped from Alluvia. But she had been running her own tests on the compound and found nothing harmful to her species. "I would be honored," she said finally. Scientific curiosity won over caution. Dr. Kim entered through the airlock, carrying the small cup. "Just a tiny amount," he said, handing it to her. "If you feel any discomfort at all, let me know immediately." Lena carefully accepted the cup. The liquid inside was clear and odorless. She brought it to her lips and took a small sip. It had almost no taste to her Alluvian palate. "Interesting," she said politely. "What does it taste like to humans?" "Slightly sweet, with a hint of citrus," Dr. Kim replied. "Can you taste anything?" "No," Lena admitted. "Alluvian taste receptors are quite different from yours." They rejoined the celebration, with Lena participating from her side of the clear barrier. She finished her small drink, feeling pleased at this small cultural exchange. The humans seemed to appreciate her participation. Later that evening, as she returned to her quarters, Lena noticed something odd. Her skin felt unusually warm, and her breathing seemed slightly faster than normal. She checked her personal medical scanner, but all her vital signs appeared within normal ranges for Illuvians on Earth. Probably just excitement from the day's events, she told herself. The next morning, Lena arrived at the lab early, eager to continue their work. Dr. Kim arrived shortly after, carrying 2 cups of Earth coffee. "Good morning, Dr. Kang," he said cheerfully. "I thought you might want to try coffee. I've had it specially prepared to be safe for your biology." As Dr. Kim entered her workspace through the airlock, Lena felt a strange flutter in her chest. Her skin receptors suddenly became hypersensitive, detecting tiny changes in the air currents as he moved. The sensation was both unfamiliar and intense. "Are you all right?" Dr. Kim asked, noticing her stillness. "Your skin just changed color slightly." Lena hadn't realized her skin had darkened, a physiological response Illuvians experience during moments of heightened awareness. "I'm fine," she said quickly, just adjusting to the morning atmosphere shift. Throughout the day, the strange sensations continued. Whenever Dr. Kim came near her, Lena's third eyelid, a thin membrane Illuvians use to protect their eyes in harsh conditions, fluttered involuntarily. She found herself tracking his movements around the lab, her attention drawn to him despite her best efforts to focus on her work. During the afternoon meeting, Lena dropped her datapad 3 times while trying to present her findings. Her normally steady hands trembled slightly, and she couldn't seem to concentrate when Dr. Kim looked directly at her. "Perhaps you should rest," Dr. Kim suggested after the third accident. "You seem unusually distracted today." "Yes, perhaps I should," Lena agreed, embarrassed by her behavior. She had never experienced such difficulty maintaining professional composure. Back in her quarters, Lena ran a full diagnostic scan on herself. Her body temperature was elevated, her heart rate increased, and her neurochemical levels showed unusual patterns. Something was definitely affecting her physiology, but what? She reviewed everything she had consumed or been exposed to in the past day. The only unusual thing was the celebratory drink with the trace amount of Dr. Kim's compound. Could that be the cause? But they had tested it extensively on Illuvian tissue samples with no adverse reactions. That night, Lena slept poorly. She dreamed of Dr. Kim, his voice, his movements, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. She woke feeling confused and slightly ashamed. These thoughts were unprofessional and completely unlike her. The third day was worse. Walking into the lab, Lena immediately noticed Dr. Kim's scent, something she had never been able to detect before. Illuvians had poor olfactory senses compared to humans, but suddenly she could distinguish his particular smell from everything else in the room. During their morning research session, Dr. Kim reached past her to adjust a microscope setting. Though he didn't touch her, Lena felt as if an electrical current had passed between them. She jerked away instinctively. "Did I do something wrong?" Dr. Kim asked, concerned. "No," Lena said quickly. I think something is affecting me. I haven't been feeling quite myself." Dr. Kim's expression changed to one of scientific interest. "What symptoms are you experiencing? Could it be an environmental reaction?" Lena couldn't bring herself to admit the truth, that somehow, inexplicably, she felt intensely drawn to him in a way that went beyond professional collaboration or even friendship. Such attachments between different species were unheard of on Illuvia. "I'm not sure," she said instead, "but I intend to find out." That evening, Lena stayed late in the lab after everyone else had gone. She took a sample of her own blood and ran a comprehensive analysis. When the results appeared on her screen, she stared in shock. The pheromone compound from Dr. Kim's celebration drink had not simply passed through her system as expected. Instead, it had bonded with her own biochemical receptors, creating an entirely new compound that was now circulating throughout her body. Lena slumped in her chair as the implications became clear. She hadn't just ingested a human pheromone. She had accidentally triggered a profound biochemical attraction response to Dr. Kim himself. Lena stared at the blood test results on her screen, unable to believe what she was seeing. The chemical compound from Dr. Kim's celebratory drink had bonded with her Illuvian hormones, creating something entirely new. According to her analysis, this new compound was mimicking Illuvian mating chemicals, hormones that her species produced only once every 7 years during their brief reproductive cycle. "This is impossible," she whispered to the empty lab. Her fingers trembled as she ran the test again. The results were the same. Illuvians prided themselves on their logical, unemotional approach to life. Their biological mating urges were strictly controlled and confined to specific times. Yet here she was, experiencing something that shouldn't happen for another 3 years in her natural cycle. The lab door opened, and Lena quickly closed the test results on her screen. Dr. Kim walked in, carrying a tablet. "You're here early," he said with a smile. Lena's third eyelid fluttered uncontrollably, and she felt her skin darkening to a deeper blue, a biological response she couldn't hide. "I wanted to finish some tests," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Dr. Kim approached her workstation, and Lena felt her heart rate increase dramatically. He was wearing a different cologne today, and her newly heightened senses detected every note of it. The scent seemed to wrap around her, making it difficult to concentrate. "I was thinking about our research," Dr. Kim said, apparently not noticing her discomfort. "What if we tried combining our compound with—" He stopped suddenly, looking at her with concern. "Your skin is changing color again. Are you feeling unwell?" Lena took a deep breath. She was a scientist. This was a scientific problem. She needed to approach it logically. "Dr. Kim, I need to show you something," she said formally. She reopened her test results and turned the screen toward him. "I believe I'm experiencing an unexpected reaction to the compound I consumed at the celebration." Dr. Kim studied the screen, his expression changing from curiosity to surprise. "These readings, they show a molecular fusion between our compound and your biochemistry." He looked up at her. "How is this affecting you?" Lena's skin darkened further with embarrassment. How could she explain to a human that she was experiencing inappropriate attraction cycles, that every time he came near, her body responded as if he were a potential mate? "The compound has triggered hormonal responses in my biology that are inappropriate for professional settings," she said carefully. Dr. Kim's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "Are you saying our social bonding compound is acting as some kind of attraction stimulant for your species?" Lena nodded stiffly. "In simple terms, yes. What creates mild feelings of comfort and trust in humans seems to be triggering mating responses in my biology." An awkward silence fell between them. Lena wished she could disappear into the floor. This was beyond embarrassing. It was a complete loss of the professional dignity that Illuvians valued above all else. "This is fascinating from a scientific perspective," Dr. Kim finally said, his voice carefully neutral. "Cross-species chemical interactions are rarely this dramatic. Do you think we should document this reaction in our research?" "Absolutely not," Lena said, more forcefully than she intended. Her skin flashed a bright cyan blue, the Illuvian equivalent of a blush. "I mean, I would prefer to resolve this issue privately before involving others." Dr. Kim nodded. "Of course. I understand. This is a personal matter, as well as a scientific one." He moved to a respectful distance. "How can I help?" Lena appreciated his professional approach. "We need to develop a counteragent to neutralize the compound in my system. But to do that, we need to understand exactly how it's interacting with my biology. That means we'll need to work closely together," Dr. Kim said. "Will that be difficult for you, given the circumstances?" "Yes," Lena admitted, "but I am a scientist first. I can manage my responses." She hoped that was true. Over the next few days, they worked on understanding the unexpected chemical reaction. To minimize disruption, they scheduled their joint research for early mornings and late evenings when the lab was empty. Dr. Kim was careful to maintain physical distance, but they still needed to work in the same space. Working together was both torture and fascinating for Lena. Every time Dr. Kim spoke, she found herself analyzing his voice patterns rather than his words. When he moved, her eyes tracked him automatically. Yet at the same time, their scientific discoveries were groundbreaking. Your species evolved without certain neurotransmitter pathways that humans use for social bonding. Dr. Kim explained one evening as they reviewed their findings. When introduced to your system, these chemicals create intense responses with no biological regulation. Lena nodded, maintaining her scientific detachment despite her internal turmoil. Illuvians separated emotional responses from physical ones thousands of years ago in our evolution. We experience emotions cognitively, not chemically. Until now, Dr. Kim pointed out, this compound is essentially giving you a human-like emotional response system. The realization was disturbing to Lena. The Illuvians considered themselves above the chemical-driven emotional responses of other species. Now she was experiencing exactly what her people had evolved beyond. Is it affecting your judgment? Dr. Kim asked cautiously. No, Lena said firmly. I am aware of the physical responses, but my cognitive functions remain intact. She hesitated, though I find myself noticing things I wouldn't normally notice. Like what? Dr. Kim asked. The way your voice changes when you're excited about a discovery, the pattern of your movements around the lab, the different scents you carry each day. Lena stopped, embarrassed again. These observations serve no scientific purpose, yet I cannot seem to stop making them. Dr. Kim looked thoughtful. That sounds similar to human attraction patterns. We become hyper-aware of people we're attracted to, noticing small details, tracking their movements. It's inefficient, Lena said with frustration. Dr. Kim laughed softly. Yes, I suppose it is. Human attraction rarely makes logical sense. As they continued their research, Lena found herself curious about human experiences of attraction. Were they always this distracting, this consuming? Did humans really live with these sensations regularly? Dr. Kim, she asked one evening as they were analyzing data, do humans always experience attraction this intensely? How do you accomplish anything? He smiled. Most humans don't experience it quite so suddenly or intensely. Our bodies are used to these chemicals, and we develop mental techniques to manage it in professional settings. What techniques? Lena asked eagerly. Perhaps they would help me. Focused breathing. Cognitive redirection. Sometimes just acknowledging the feelings and then setting them aside temporarily. Lena tried these methods with limited success. The chemical pull remained strong, but she did find she could function more effectively by directly acknowledging the sensations rather than trying to ignore them. By the end of the week, they had mapped the exact interaction between the human compound and Illuvian biology. The molecular structure on the screen told the story clearly. A simple human social bonding chemical had triggered a cascade of responses in Lena's biology that mimicked the rare Illuvian mating cycle. I believe we have enough data now to create a counteragent, Dr. Kim said, studying their results. We can synthesize a compound that should break down the hybrid chemical in your system without disrupting your normal functions. Lena should have felt only relief. Soon, she would return to normal, logical, unemotional, professional. Yet she found herself strangely hesitant. These new sensations, while disruptive, had also been educational. She had experienced something that no other Illuvian scientist had ever documented, how it felt to process emotions like a human. Before we synthesize the counteragent, she said slowly, I would like to complete my documentation of the experience. For scientific purposes, she added quickly. Dr. Kim nodded. Of course. This is a unique opportunity to study cross-species emotional responses. Take all the time you need. As Lena recorded her experiences that night, she found herself wondering if there was more to the human way of experiencing the world than Illuvians had previously believed. Perhaps these chemical responses that her people had evolved beyond actually served some purpose that pure logic could not fulfill. The laboratory felt different at night, quieter, more intimate. Lena adjusted the settings on her microscope, carefully examining the molecular structure displayed on her screen. The combination of human pheromones and Illuvian biology created beautiful, complex patterns that she might have appreciated purely aesthetically if they weren't currently wreaking havoc on her system. Dr. Kim worked at the station beside her, his presence both comforting and distracting. Over the past few days, they had fallen into a rhythm, working late into the night when the lab was empty, giving them privacy to address her embarrassing condition. "I think I've identified the binding site," Dr. Kim said, pointing to his screen. "See this receptor? In humans, it creates mild feelings of trust and relaxation. But in your biology, it's connecting to your reproductive hormone system." Lena leaned closer to see, then immediately regretted it as Dr. Kim's scent enveloped her. She took a careful step back. "The structure is similar to our 7-year bonding hormone," she confirmed, trying to keep her voice steady, "but much more powerful. Illuvians evolved to experience attraction only during specific biological windows, while humans feel varying degrees of attraction throughout their lives," Dr. Kim added. "It must be overwhelming to suddenly experience something your biology normally strictly controls." Lena's skin darkened slightly. "Yes, it is distracting." Working together was becoming increasingly difficult. Every day, Lena documented new symptoms. Her skin grew more sensitive, especially when Dr. Kim was nearby. She found herself tracking the sound of his voice, even from across the lab. Most disturbing was her growing awareness of his emotional states, something Illuvians rarely noticed about other species. "You seem tired today," she observed as Dr. Kim stifled a yawn. It was their 5th late night in a row. "I didn't sleep well," he admitted. "I was thinking about our problem." Lena noticed the slight change in his heart rate when he said "our problem." She found it touching that he considered her condition a shared challenge rather than just her issue. "I appreciate your dedication," she said formally. "Many humans would find this situation too awkward to address." Dr. Kim smiled. "Scientists don't shy away from awkward situations if they're scientifically interesting. And this is definitely interesting." Their research had revealed something revolutionary, that despite evolutionary differences, certain chemical pathways between humans and Illuvians were surprisingly compatible. What they learned could transform interspecies medicine. "I've been thinking," Dr. Kim said the following evening as they reviewed their data. "Your species evolved without these particular emotional chemicals. What's it like experiencing them for the first time?" Lena considered the question carefully. No one had asked how she felt, only about her symptoms. "It's illuminating," she said finally. "Illuvians pride themselves on logic and clarity of thought. We believe emotions cloud judgment. But these feelings don't eliminate my logical thinking. They add a dimension to it." "How so?" Dr. Kim asked, genuinely curious. "I still see patterns and draw conclusions as before. But now I also care about those patterns in a different way." Lena struggled to explain. "For example, I've always found molecular structures interesting. Now I find them beautiful. The distinction is subtle but significant." Dr. Kim nodded thoughtfully. "Humans never evolved to separate emotion from reason the way the Illuvians did. We've always had to balance both." "Is it always this intense?" Lena asked. "These feelings?" "Not usually," Dr. Kim said with a small smile. "What you're experiencing is probably the equivalent of a human teenage crush combined with adult attraction, all happening at once instead of developing slowly over time." "Inefficient," Lena commented, but without her usual conviction. By the end of the week, they had gathered enough data to begin developing a counteragent. Their solution required synthesizing a compound that would break the bonds between the human pheromone and Lena's receptors without damaging her natural systems. The tricky part, Dr. Kim explained, carefully mixing chemicals in a sealed chamber is creating something that targets only the hybrid compound without affecting your normal functions. Lena watched his hands work with practiced precision. She had never noticed before how graceful human movements could be. Each careful adjustment of the equipment, each measured addition of compounds, all displayed a care and attention that she found surprisingly appealing. "You're very skilled," she observed. Dr. Kim glanced up, surprised by the compliment. "Thank you. So are you." Their eyes met briefly, and Lena felt that now familiar flutter in her chest. She looked away quickly, focusing on her own work. The first attempt at a counteragent failed. Instead of breaking down the hybrid compound, it temporarily strengthened it, causing Lena's symptoms to intensify dramatically. For several hours, she had to isolate herself in her quarters, unable to maintain professional composure around Dr. Kim. "I apologize for the setback," Dr. Kim said the next day, looking genuinely distressed. "Are you feeling better?" "Yes," Lena said, though her skin still tingled uncomfortably. "It was an informative failure. We now know which molecular pathway not to target." Their second attempt produced no reaction at all. The third caused mild nausea, but didn't affect the hybrid compound. "This is proving more challenging than I anticipated," Dr. Kim admitted after the fourth failed attempt. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. "You should rest," Lena suggested. "Your species requires more sleep than mine." "I feel responsible," he said quietly. "My compound caused this situation." "We both agreed to the experiment," Lena reminded him. "Scientific discovery always involves risk." As they continued working together, Lena began to notice changes beyond the physical symptoms. She found herself wanting to know more about Dr. Kim as a person, not just as a colleague. His life on Earth, his experiences, his perspective, all became subjects of interest. "Do you have a family unit?" she asked one evening as they waited for a simulation to complete. "You mean, am I married?" "No," Dr. Kim replied. "My work has always been my priority. What about you?" "Illuvians form pair bonds only during our 7-year cycle," Lena explained. "My next cycle is 3 years away, or was before this incident." An awkward silence fell between them. "I've been meaning to ask," Dr. Kim said carefully. "When we finally develop a working counteragent, will you remember these experiences? Will they affect you after the chemical is neutralized?" Lena had wondered the same thing. "I don't know. No Illuvian has experienced this before. The memories will remain, certainly, but whether the emotional context will persist without the chemical support is unknown." Something like disappointment flickered across Dr. Kim's face, so quickly Lena might have imagined it. After 2 weeks of intensive work, they finally created a promising formula. Their simulation showed it successfully breaking down the hybrid compound without affecting Lena's natural systems. "I think this will work," Dr. Kim said, holding up a vial of softly glowing blue liquid. "The molecular structure should bind to the hybrid compound and neutralize it within 24 hours. Lena stared at the vial. Soon she would return to normal, logical, unemotional, unaffected by Dr. Kim's presence. The thought should have brought only relief. Instead, she felt a complex mixture of emotions she couldn't fully identify. "Before I take it," she said slowly, "I would like to document one final observation." "What's that?" Dr. Kim asked. "In my affected state, I've experienced something no Illuvian scientist has documented before, the full range of attraction responses that humans consider normal. This has been uncomfortable, but also educational. I believe I understand humans better now." Dr. Kim nodded. "Your experience will be valuable for future interspecies relations." "Yes," Lena agreed. "But more than that, I've gained personal insight. Illuvians have always considered our evolutionary path superior, moving beyond chemical emotions to pure logic. But I wonder now if we lost something valuable in that process." Dr. Kim smiled. Maybe the ideal is a balance between the two. Perhaps, Lena said thoughtfully, taking the vial from his hand. In any case, this has been a remarkable collaboration, Dr. Kim. Ta, he said softly. My given name is Ta. Ta, Lena repeated, feeling the name in her mouth. Thank you for your help, Ta. She carefully unsealed the vial, ready to return to normal, yet somehow changed in ways that no counteragent could reverse. The blue liquid tasted bitter against Lena's tongue. She swallowed it quickly, setting the empty vial down on the laboratory counter. Dr. Kim, Ta, watched her with concern in his eyes. How do you feel? He asked. No immediate changes, Lena replied, running a small scanner over her arm to monitor her vital signs. The counteragent will need time to circulate through my system and break down the hybrid compound. Ta nodded. We should continue to monitor your condition over the next 24 hours. They had agreed that Lena would remain in the laboratory overnight for observation. The rest of the science team had been told she was conducting a sensitive experiment that required constant monitoring, not entirely untrue. As night fell outside the large windows, the laboratory grew quiet. Only the soft hum of equipment and the occasional beep from Lena's medical scanner broke the silence. Ta had set up a small cot for himself near Lena's workspace, insisting on staying in case anything went wrong. You don't need to stay, Lena had told him. I can monitor myself. I'm responsible for this situation, Ta had replied firmly. I'm not leaving you alone until we know the counteragent works properly. Now, several hours later, Lena sat reviewing their research notes while Ta dozed on the cot. She found her attention drifting from the screen to his sleeping form. His face looked younger in sleep, more vulnerable. She still noticed every detail about him. The way his eyelashes rested against his cheeks, the steady rise and fall of his chest, but the intense pull she had felt before was gradually fading. The counteragent was working. Lena felt conflicted. Part of her was relieved to be returning to normal. The constant distraction of heightened awareness had been exhausting and unprofessional. Yet another part of her felt a strange sense of loss. She had experienced something no other Illuvian had, the full range of emotional responses that humans lived with every day. Around midnight, Ta woke and came to check on her. Any changes? He asked, yawning. The hybrid compound is breaking down, Lena confirmed, showing him her latest scan. My biochemistry is returning to normal Illuvian parameters. Tai studied the readings. How do you feel subjectively? Lena considered the question. Less, overwhelmed by your presence. I still notice details about you, but they don't consume my attention as before. That's good, Ta said, though his smile seemed slightly forced. Soon everything will be back to normal. Yes, Lena agreed. But what was normal now? Her experience had changed her, perhaps permanently, even as the chemicals left her system. By morning, Lena's scans showed almost no trace of the hybrid compound. Her body had returned to standard Illuvian patterns. The physical symptoms, the skin sensitivity, the involuntary reactions to Ta's presence, the heightened awareness, had subsided. The counteragent was successful, she announced as they reviewed the final scans together. I am fully recovered. Good, Ta said, looking genuinely relieved. I was worried we might have permanently altered your biology. Not permanently, Lena said, though the experience has been educational. They spent the morning organizing their research notes. Their accidental discovery had immense potential for interspecies medicine. The interaction between human and Illuvian biochemistry suggested new treatments for conditions affecting both species. We should prepare a research paper, Ta suggested, without mentioning the personal aspects, of course. Yes, Lena agreed. Our findings could revolutionize interspecies medical protocols. Working side by side now was different. Lena could focus properly on their research without being distracted by Ta's every movement. She no longer felt her skin tingle when he came near. Her third eyelid remained still, no longer fluttering uncontrollably in his presence. Yet something had changed within her. Though the chemical influence was gone, the memory of those feelings remained. She understood something about human experience that no other Illuvian scientist could claim. As they finished compiling their data, Todd looked up from his work. "When do you return to Illuvia?" "In 3 days," Lena replied. "My assignment on Earth is nearly complete." Todd nodded, looking down at his tablet. "Will you continue this line of research when you return home?" "Yes," Lena said, "though finding research partners will be challenging. Few Illuvian scientists understand human biochemistry as well as you do." "Perhaps," Ta hesitated, "perhaps we could continue our collaboration remotely, share data and findings." Lena felt a new sensation, not the overwhelming pull of the hybrid compound, but something gentler. Interest, curiosity, a desire to maintain their connection. "I would find that valuable," she said carefully. "Our combined perspectives have proven scientifically productive." Ta smiled, relief evident in his expression. "I've learned so much working with you, Lena. About Illuvian biology, yes, but also about different ways of experiencing the world." "As have I," Lena admitted. "The Illuvians have always prided themselves on evolving beyond chemical emotions. We consider our logical approach superior, but experiencing human-like emotional responses has been enlightening." "How so?" Tai asked, looking genuinely curious. Lena considered her answer carefully. "Logic is efficient for problem-solving, but emotions create connections. They add context and meaning that pure logic cannot provide." The day before her departure, the Earth Global Science Institute held a small ceremony celebrating the successful collaboration. The director praised their groundbreaking discoveries in interspecies medicine. Dr. Kang and Dr. Kim have opened new pathways for understanding how different species can benefit from shared medical knowledge, the director announced. "Their work will save lives across our worlds." At the reception afterward, Lena stood somewhat apart from the human scientists, still uncomfortable with Earth's social customs. Todd joined her, carrying 2 glasses of water. "No special compounds this time," he said with a small smile. "Promise." Lena accepted the glass. "I've been thinking about our experience," she said. "On Illuvia, we have a saying, 'Knowledge blooms from the most unexpected seeds.' We have a similar saying on Earth," Tay replied. "Accidents can lead to the greatest discoveries." "Indeed," Lena agreed. "This particular accident has changed how I understand both humans and my own species." On her final day, Tai accompanied Lena to the transport ship. They stood somewhat awkwardly at the base of the boarding ramp. "I've prepared a data package with our complete research findings," Ta said, handing her a small drive. "And I've included my direct communication codes for our continued collaboration." "Thank you," Lena said, accepting it. "I will contact you when I return to Illuvia." Neither seemed to know the proper farewell protocol. Humans typically embraced or shook hands, both uncomfortably intimate by Illuvian standards. Illuvians performed complex hand gestures that most humans found difficult to replicate. After a moment's hesitation, Lena extended her 4-fingered hand in the human style. "I believe this is customary among human colleagues." Ta looked surprised but pleased. He gently took her hand in his. "Yes, it is." The touch was brief but meaningful, a bridge between their different worlds. "Safe journey, Dr. Kang," Ta said formally. "Thank you, Dr. Kim," Lena replied, equally formal. Then, more softly, "Ta." As her ship lifted off from Earth, Lena looked down at the blue and green planet growing smaller below. The chemical effects had faded completely from her system. She was herself again, logical, controlled, focused. Yet she knew she would never be quite the same Illuvian who had arrived on Earth. She understood something now that she hadn't before, that there were different ways of experiencing the universe, and neither the Illuvian nor the human way was inherently superior. They were simply different paths that had evolved over millennia. She touched the data drive Ta had given her, already planning their next research project. Perhaps what had begun as an accidental ingestion of a human pheromone would lead to something far more significant, a new understanding between their worlds. On her scanner, she pulled up their final research paper title, Cross-Species Biochemical Interactions, New Frontiers in Interspecies Medicine. Beneath the formal words lay the real story, how an alien woman accidentally ingested an Earth pheromone and discovered that connections between different beings could form in the most unexpected ways.